Hey everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to episode 174 of the I Suck at Jiu Jitsu show. So today we're going to talk about, we're going to look at a culmination of everything that we have learned on the I Suck at Jiu Jitsu show over the last 3+ years. We've boiled down learning jiu-jitsu and its efficiency and its effectiveness to just 3 points. And these are the three kind of essential factors on whether or not you are going to get good or hopefully even eventually get great at grappling. And so we're going to approach this one just a little bit differently. We're going to have a lot of callbacks to previous episodes, previous ideas, previous conversations that we've had with all kinds of other people. And I think that this episode is really going to simplify what you need to be focused on, where you should be putting your time, and maybe where there are even some holes in your understanding and your ability to get better at jiu-jitsu on your own or to maximize learning with your coach. And we're going to cover all that in today's episode. That being said, since this episode really is the culmination of the entirety of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show, I have a recommendation, something maybe for you that are a weekly listener to the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. If you get something out of this episode, if you enjoy this episode and it sparks a thought of like, oh, I thought about this training partner, or even this old training partner, somebody I used to know that used to train, and maybe they missed just a little bit of one of these 3 points, and maybe that is the reason that they quit jiu-jitsu, or maybe that's the reason that they're not getting as good as fast as they want to be. And so if there is somebody that kind of it sparks your mind in this episode, please send them this episode. If there was an episode to share with somebody, you want somebody or just a lot of your friends to listen to the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show, I really think that this episode is the one, because we really approach this episode in the manner, in really what the show was about: efficiency and effectiveness in jiu-jitsu, and making it really, really simple for anyone to be able to understand and anyone to be able to perform. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and just jump right into this episode. If you guys share this episode, always like if you share it on your Instagram or something, always give me a tag. I always like to see that and get to have a lot of conversations with people that listen to the show because of those shares. And so, like I said, share this episode, enjoy this episode, and try your best to use it, because I really think the information that we're going to discuss is going to be so helpful for so many people that are trying their best to learn jiu-jitsu. Let's get into the episode. Here are the 3 steps to jiu-jitsu greatness. Now, keep in mind, we are not just approaching competition on this episode. We're not just approaching self-defense jiu-jitsu. We're not approaching how police officers should be training. We're not approaching anything specifically. We are looking at grappling. We are looking at using the art of jiu-jitsu. And we're going to look at the 3 things that are necessary, no matter what your jiu-jitsu goals are, no matter how or the reason you're trying to learn jiu-jitsu. We're going to look at the 3 ways to actually help you learn, to actually help you go and be one of those people at the gym that after a new guy comes in, that he walks up to the coach and he goes, "Oh my gosh, I just grappled with that person. They're unbelievable. They're so good. I didn't even understand what was happening." We want to get you there. And then maybe even farther than that, getting to being a black belt, getting to even go past black belt and be more skilled than an average black belt. These 3 things that we are going to cover in this episode are exactly how to do that. And the first step that it takes, we all start with this step to some extent, is understanding the fundamental principles of jiu-jitsu. So we talk about fundamentals a lot. And a lot of times on the show, we talk about fundamentals in a derogatory way. And the reason that we talk about that is because with jujitsu, all coaches have these ideas, these opinions on fundamental techniques. Without this technique, you do not know jujitsu. The technique that I usually drag through the mud is the closed guard armbar. And sometimes very seldom do I explain myself on this show, but I will explain why I don't think of that as a fundamental of jujitsu. And then we're going to get into what personally I believe are actual fundamentals of jujitsu and how you could be approaching this, how you could be understanding the fundamentals deeper, like the point suggests that we will. So I have a black belt. He's been on the show a couple times. His name's Eric Huebner. He wrestled his whole life. He competes at ultra heavyweight generally, which is like 220 and above. It's just like an unlimited weight class. And he's also a black belt in jiu-jitsu under me. And there was this time in his jiu-jitsu journey where he asked me, okay, well, what guard should I be focused on? What guard should I be learning? And this was kind of when he came to me and started training with me. I believe it was late blue belt that he asked me this. And I was a brown belt at the time, and this was a strong opinion, but it was more of an experiment than anything. I said, I don't know how much you should be focused on your guard. And for most people, when a new wrestler comes in, they're like, yeah, you need to understand the guard. You need to focus on the guard. And instead, with Eric, I said, Eric, you've spent the last 20 plus years of your life wrestling, the last 20 plus years of your life making sure that you are not on your back. So let me ask you this. If someone at ultra heavyweight was good enough to put you on your back, I said, how long do you think you will have needed to train guard in order to be able to sweep or submit this person? And he said, I don't know if there's enough training for me. I don't know if I could spend the next 10 years on guard. And he's like, but if somebody's good enough to take me down, they're probably going to be good enough to beat my 10-year guard. And so what we did was we didn't work guard. We worked beating the guard. We worked, you are going to be on top. How do we beat the guard? What should we focus on to beat the guard? And then what happened was really interesting. I'll tell you in a second what happened. But this is back to the analogy of the closed guard armbar. If I said, Eric, I need you to teach the closed guard armbar, or I need you to hit the closed guard armbar on this guy, he would look at me like I was an idiot. He'd be like, why? And my only answer could be, well, because it's a fundamental move of jiu-jitsu. And if you don't know it, well, you don't know jiu-jitsu. Wait a second. This guy is one divisions, really tough divisions at purple and brown belt. This guy went to a new sport of grappling called combat wrestling. If you've never seen it, super interesting sport. It's basically wrestling with submissions, and won the world championships of it twice, made the American, qualified for the American Nationals 2 times, got on the team both times, won the world both times, is in the Hall of Fame for combat wrestling. But he doesn't know jiu-jitsu because he doesn't do closed guard armbars? As if it's a fundamental principle, meaning something that without it, you can't have jiu-jitsu, right? It is fundamental. It is essential. But he can do all the other jiu-jitsu. And something funny actually happened later into his purple belt, maybe up into his brown belt, when I gave him the freedom of, you never have to play bottom. He started playing bottom. Really, he started playing bottom because he understood it so well from the top perspective that he said, oh, these are the things that matter when you're on bottom, because these are the things I'm always trying to take from my opponent. These are the fights I'm always trying to win with my opponent. And now guess what? It's not closed guard. It's not closed guard armbar, but he has a pretty darn good guard. And it came from me not painting him into a box, me saying, hey, just focus on understanding jiu-jitsu. Focus on taking the grappling that you already understand, which is these 20 plus years of wrestling, and see if you can apply those ideas to jiu-jitsu. And so now I'm at this point where Eric has these principles that he will explain to me that came from wrestling, and they like break my brain. But again, that wouldn't have happened if we got too close to the picture. If we said jiu-jitsu is these 10 moves, and if you don't know these 10 moves, you don't know jiu-jitsu. Instead, we focused on fundamentals. We focused on things that actually matter. And so when we're talking about jiu-jitsu, we're talking about understanding, if you are on day one, your understanding is going to be to learn closed guard armbar because you have no other context. You have nothing else to apply to. You need to first just start understanding the names of things. And your gym may be different. Your gym may call side control. It may call it cross side, or it may have a different way of explaining side control. The language at your gym is going to be different than maybe the language at my gym, Head Nod HQ. But you first need to understand the language. You first need to just know what positions people are talking about. You need to know mount. You need to know side control. Even if you don't know really what makes those positions matter yet, your first bit of understanding is just going to be learning names. It's just going to be learning little parts of jiu-jitsu, little nuances, learning where people say to grip, where people say not to grip. But then what's going to start to happen is you are going to start to find that jiu-jitsu, as it grows in your mind and it starts to become all these different terms and it starts to become this huge thing that you're overwhelmed with. For most people, this goes on until blue belt, where you're just adding and you're adding and you're adding. And we call this on the show, we call this the victim of 1,000 moves. And it's because that initial first 6 weeks to 6 months, all you're trying to do is learn as many techniques as you can, learn as many ideas as you can, and just go, okay, I'm starting to see some of the picture as a whole. I'm starting to see that when I am in closed guard, I can sweep somebody and land in mount, and those two positions connect. When you start to see that, that is understanding of jiu-jitsu. Now, there are other ways to understand jiu-jitsu more. You don't just have to rely on your own understanding, what you are seeing and what you are hearing. You can start to see different things by watching instructionals, by listening to a podcast, by watching YouTube videos, by doing whatever, watching whatever is fun for you, that gives you more context. That is going to be good for you. The only problem is when you start to look at that context and start to say, oh, this new technique, I don't do this yet, so I have to add this into my game. And then this technique, I don't do this either. I have to add this into my game. And then you start to become the victim of 1,000 moves. And the victim of 1,000 moves is someone who knows 1,000 things, but is good at 0 things. So for us, as we start to progress, and this is my opinion, but I think that you will notice this with good grapplers, they start to boil down these 1,000 techniques into a few ideas. If you were to watch me pass the guard, you would go, wow, Josh does 1,000 different passes from the guard. And yes, I do. It's because the situations I'm in, they're going to require different responses from me. You know, if your foot is on my hip, it's going to change versus if your foot is on my shoulder. You know, the way I defend this position, the way I approach this position. But for me, the ideas of, we talk about chest over chest all the time. We talk about keeping our hips free all the time. Those ideas is what I'm thinking about when I'm passing the guard. I'm not really thinking about, okay, spider guard. What instructional did I read? What did they say to do from spider guard? What was that John Danaher YouTube ad where he was talking about passing spider guard? Ooh, I don't remember. Oh, I'm triangled, right? No. As I've gotten better, my thoughts have become simpler. I am no longer the victim of 1,000 moves, even though I know 1,000 moves. I've boiled them down to a few ideas, a few ways to look at jujitsu. And this is something that you will not get to until very far down your jujitsu journey. But it is what you should be focused on. When we're learning techniques, we are learning a lot of context, right? Because those step by step moves, they really don't get performed step by step the way that we act like they do. You know, right hand goes collar and then left hand goes here and left foot goes here. Jiu-jitsu doesn't really happen that way. If you look at the right hand on the collar and the left hand on the sleeve and the left foot on the hip, and you realize what they are doing, those three things are helping you create a certain angle. Again, you've made jujitsu seem smaller because then you know, hey, that angle that I created for this closed guard armbar is important. That armpit space is important. Getting my leg in between the armpit space, keeping their elbow from pulling to their rib cage to just easily defend the armbar, that is important. And so no longer then am I handicapped by my right hand needs to be collar, my left hand needs to be sleeve, my left foot needs to be on the hip. I can now start to say, oh, he created my angle for me. I can go for an armbar. Or these grips help me create the angle. These grips trick him into creating the angle for me. Because I was thinking simpler, I was thinking on what matters most and not just regurgitating what was shown to me step by step. I'm able to understand jujitsu deeper. Now, also understand if you're new to jujitsu, you are going to be understanding things step by step. That's where you get your context. But like we talk about on the show, like if I were to explain concepts of jujitsu to somebody who doesn't train ever, they're not going to make that much sense because they don't have context. If I say, hey, this chest over chest position is the finishing position of basically every guard pass, you would, if you don't know any guard passes, you would just go, okay, what does that have to do with anything? But if you know a lot of guard passes, and I can show you, because you have context, I can show you how that idea applies, it is going to make jujitsu seem smaller because you're going, okay, well, I don't even have to decide on what pass I'm doing yet. All I need to do is start to focus on being chest over chest and keeping the person off my hips. With those two things on top, I'm able to start doing my knee cut. And I'm also able to start to do my Toriando. I'm able to do my leg drag. I'm able to do all the passes that I'm wanting to do because I have a better general idea. And these general ideas, I always explain when I'm teaching concepts, is like, hey, I am teaching you what black belts do. Because if you were to watch high-level guard passers, they will all end up in that chest over chest position, right? It's something that happens over and over and over, and I can see it happen. And so I go, well, maybe that's important. Maybe that little nuance is important. And when we start to break jujitsu down into a bunch of techniques, we forget to explain how important it is to be at the right distance. And so as you are focused on progression, yes, absorb what techniques you can. Learn from as many different people as you can at first. You're going to start to find, hey, it makes jujitsu simpler when I learn from this older purple belt that trains at the gym. It makes jujitsu simpler when I learn from one of the girls at the gym. I'm small and she's small. Even though I'm a guy and she's a girl, she understands what it's like to be small, and she can make jujitsu seem simpler to me. And so if our first goal is understanding fundamentals, What we should be focused on, this is what, really what learning jujitsu is, in my opinion, is going to be taking all of the stuff that we know and just boiling it down. And for us to be able to do that, we need to find people that help us do that. We need to find instructors that help us do that. Maybe we need to be better at asking questions to the coach that we have. A lot of times we don't understand because we are so bad at asking questions. If you were to ask better questions to the coach that set you up to understand the positions better, you would be better at jiu-jitsu simply because you understand. So now, with that idea of understanding, there is a warning. And I will tell you guys what that warning is after the commercial break. Hey guys, Josh McKinney here. I just want to interrupt this episode really quick and tell you about something exciting that we have going on at simplifyingjujitsu.com. And it is the free ebook, The Three Lenses. What the three lenses are the three perspectives that people will tend to look through to learn jiu-jitsu. And what's cool about the three lenses is you could actually apply a lens to each one of the points in this episode. We kind of keep the same ideas and beliefs on how to learn jiu-jitsu, and the Three Lenses ebook is no different. But what it will do is it will help you identify how you best learn jiu-jitsu and give you some different ideas, some different training methods, and some different focuses for you to better learn jiu-jitsu, in a more efficient and effective way. You can only find this free ebook, The Three Lenses, at simplifyingjujitsu.com/3. That is simplifyingjujitsu.com/3. Let's go ahead and get back to the episode. And we're back. And I'm going to tell you guys about this warning that there is after the idea of understanding fundamentals, understanding jiu-jitsu, because there is a difference between understanding and actually being good. Okay. And I'll explain why that is, and I'll explain how we can bridge the gap of understanding and actually performing, actually going onto the mats and being able to do the things that we quote unquote understand. Okay. So when you say something like this, people's first response is, well, no, that's true. Not true. You could be good at jiu-jitsu just by watching instructionals. You don't have to actually be on the mats to be good at jiu-jitsu, because John Danaher, he doesn't train and he's the best coach ever. Stupidest argument in the world. John Danaher trained for like 30 years. He hasn't just been sitting on the sideline watching stuff. He can't train anymore because he trained for like 30 years. Okay. And understand, his skill level was not separate from his ability to coach. What I mean is, he wasn't just somebody who sucked in the gym and was able to, to coach. And so that's why he's good. So to like you blue belt coaches that are like, oh no, Danaher, he doesn't roll. I'm pretty much like him now because I've watched his instructionals. No, you're absolutely wrong. And the way I can explain this, the reason I know this is because when my coach was on The Ultimate Fighter, he got to grapple with Danaher. I believe episode 3 of the show, we talked, it was one of the Kyle Watson episodes, but we talked about what it was like rolling with Danaher. But just to explain that to you, Kyle was really good. He won Pans at brown belt the year that he was on The Ultimate Fighter. Okay. So somebody winning at that level at brown belt is not only going to be a black belt, but they're probably going to be a pretty good black belt on top of that. And when it came to jiu-jitsu on that show, on that season, Kyle was probably hands down the best grappler. Okay. He would say that like the first couple weeks, Danaher was submitting him a bunch of times per round. He's like, a win for him was not getting submitted. And this is a black belt level guy. that is in the UFC, that's obviously a good athlete, literally all he did was train. He taught one class a day and train. That's all Kyle was doing at the time. And he rolled with 40-plus-year-old Danaher, was getting submitted a bunch of times. So it wasn't just understanding that Danaher had. He also found the way to take his understanding and develop skills and actually be good at jiu-jitsu. Okay, so you are not good with just understanding. Knowledge is not everything in jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is mental, but it is also physical. Okay, so just because, yes, that guy is stronger than you, don't let that be this excuse for why you lost to him, because it's a cop-out. Because there are people with your size and strength on the planet that can beat this person, that are your size, strength, and probably even age that can beat this person. There is a level of understanding and developed skills out there that could allow you to beat this person who is more physical than you are, or just simply better at jiu-jitsu than you are. So that is kind of the warning of, don't think because you watched instructionals or you listened to the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show that makes you an authority in the jiu-jitsu space. Most likely, all you're doing is regurgitating information. When you're saying, well, Danaher says the fulcrum is here, and you're like, well, I really don't even, I'm like, Josh, I didn't go to college. I don't know what a fulcrum actually is, but I know I can say it and it makes me seem smart. That's not being good at jiu-jitsu, and it's not helpful. But if you can actually go in and train these things and make them work, you might even start to find a new way to explain that same idea that Danaher talked about. Maybe it's simpler. Maybe it's more common language in your gym and you can explain it that way, right? So that is the danger of, with all of, living in the information age of jiu-jitsu. There is this arrogance that comes from like having knowledge, but you've got to be careful because you can be smart. I promise you, I have lost to Brazilian guys that I could out teach, that I could be like, hey, we could all really understand what was happening. I might even be able to explain better what they did to me than they could explain it. But it don't matter because they beat me up. That is what matters, right? And so let's look at point number 2. Point number 1, we were talking about understanding fundamentals. The second point, taking what we understand and actually getting good at it, is going to be in developing an effective practice routine. Okay. We always talk about training method. Training method is how you get from understanding to actually being skilled. And there are all kinds of different ways that we can train. I am getting to this point now where I think that there is no one absolute, this is the only way to train. The reason I'm getting there is because I get to fight so many high-level guys being an adult competitor. But 2, I also get to learn from so many high-level guys being a podcaster. And what I notice is the training methods that they push may be different. And yes, some are more effective, and definitely some are going to be more effective for specific people. But you're still doing this thing of pushing training method. They focus on understanding, however that may be, whether it's in watching instructionals, whether it's listening to the podcast, whether it is watching YouTube, Instagram, anything you could be doing, just sitting in class and having jiu-jitsu conversation. They increase their understanding, and then they have some method in which they apply that understanding and then get more skilled at that understanding. So how we can look at this, I think the first thing to understand when it comes to the method in which you're training, not everyone has full control or any control in how they're training, right? A lot of people are a subject of whatever their coach says that they should be training and whatever their coach says they should be doing. If that is the case, make sure that you are engaged in whatever type of training your coach is trying to have you do, because you don't know if it's going to be effective and helpful for you. Really, you don't know until you try it. I am not a big proponent on like what you would call deadpan drilling, but this is because I've done it for years. And that's why I'm not a proponent on it anymore, is because I found other methods that worked for me better. But to say absolute that no one should deadpan drill because it doesn't work for me, that's just not true. Some people's minds work better breaking down the idea into steps, right? And that's how they bridge that gap between understanding and actually being good. Some people are going to feel better doing designated winner, right? Cool thing just happened. Designated winner got a shout out on the BJJ Mental Models podcast. And I don't know numbers of things. But I assume that they are like one of the biggest, they are the biggest jiu-jitsu podcast. That's just my assumption. But cool that Designated Winner got a shout out on it. If you guys don't know what Designated Winner is, episodes 158 and 129. Basically, it's 2 hours of pure content on what Designated Winner is. I think 158 is probably a little more concise, but 129 is also very, very good. And I think with the two, you would really understand what Designated Winner is and how to apply it to your training. And again, this is like Designated Winner was not something that I invented. And we kind of said that they said that on the BJJ Mental Models episode. A lot of gyms are doing something like it, but until we put a name on it, until we put a face on it, we can't even begin to start understanding together how this could work and how it could be more effective, right? I think that was kind of fell off on a tangent there. But anyway, like you said, you won't have the control of your training, and that is totally okay. Your job, your first 5-10 years of jiu-jitsu is going to be learning how you best learn, right? And that is where your effective practice routine comes from. It doesn't come from, hey guys, in the comments, I'm going to have my practice routine. I'm going to have my weekly routine, my monthly routine, and you can just download it and you'll be able to do that. It doesn't work like that, right? Because one, what works for me isn't going to work for you. But two, I probably train a lot less Designated Winner, a lot less trailing, a lot less everything than you do at this point. But that's just because for me, I am in a different point in my jiu-jitsu. For me, my jiu-jitsu is about, all right, I am good at jiu-jitsu, but I want to apply that into adult competition. And that's something I don't think that I have done a good enough job yet of, right? I'm not ready to retire from adult competition because I just don't feel like I have performed enough of my real jiu-jitsu, of my best jiu-jitsu there. And we've talked about it before. A big struggle for me in the adult competition scene has been staying healthy. It's been the biggest battle for me basically the entire time I've had this show. It has been a really big battle for me. And so how I'm training in prep for these tournaments and these super fights that I have in these matches and this main event that I have February 25th, that if you guys are in the St. Louis area or wanting to drive to the St. Louis area and have a really, really, really fun night of watching jiu-jitsu that I get to be the main event in against Daisy Fresh's Josh Murdoch, then you guys absolutely should get tickets for that. But the way I'm training for that is different than probably the way you should be training if you are a blue belt competitor. You probably need more live rounds. You probably need to be in more bad positions. You probably need those things more, right? But anymore for me, just for right now, because staying healthy is the primary thing for me. My routine is totally different. My routine is utilizing stretching. My routine is utilizing strength training and then jujitsu, right? And my focus on understanding of jujitsu anymore is kind of off the mats. It's watching more jujitsu. It's talking to more high level people. And then when it's time to get that more information and I need to take that information and actually apply it, I'm going to use training method to do that. I'm going to tweak my effective practice routine by adding more designated winner from whatever position, adding more drilling from whatever position, right? That's how you can focus on getting better and building the right routine. And there are kind of certain talking points that I stayed away from in this point, in point number 2, developing an effective practice routine. And that is because we're going to touch on them in point number 3. In points, all 3 of these points will combine at the end. Will make them make a lot more sense. But last little thought on developing an effective practice routine. For the people that say, okay, I have zero control over my training. I can't make open mats, and so I can't play designated winner. I can't do this or I can't do that. What you can do is you can even look at some ideas on I almost sounded like I said end with a D, in round training methods. Okay. The first episode of the show, episode 92, also, those 2 episodes, 2 of the most listened to episodes on the show, they're both titled The Simplest Way to Progress at Jiu-Jitsu. And it is an in-round training method called the end goal method. It's a really, really simple method to get a lot of understanding of an end goal position, either a submission or a dominant position. You will start to learn how jiu-jitsu connects to whatever that submission, maybe it's Kimura. You'll start to learn like, wow, Kimura from top and Kimura from bottom aren't that much different. Yes, the setups are different. Yes, the way that I play the position will be different, but I start to find that the grips and the angles and the open elbow idea, they're all the same. And then jiu-jitsu starts to seem smaller. And I also start to actually understand the Kimura better. Something I forgot to say during the understanding fundamentals portion is like your first job for understanding fundamentals in jiu-jitsu is just to learn one thing very well. Like get blue belt level at one thing. And this doesn't take that long to do it. If you really look at training method, I think you could get decent at probably anything in like 10 minutes, any one thing. You could do like 3 minutes of drilling it, meaning having a conversation with my partner and saying, how does this feel? How does that feel? And then he does it to me and he asks me the same questions. And then we're kind of conversating back and forth because we're both getting the feel. We're both getting to see, okay, this is how this move works. This is why it works. Okay, I'm understanding a little more now, right? Then from there, we try to add it to the rest of our jiu-jitsu. We use designated winner to do that. 20% resistance. I'm going to try to Kimura you, but if the guard passes there, I'll just pass the guard, right? Or if the back take's there or if whatever's there, I'll just do that too. But I'm trying to Kimura you. Don't feed me too much, just kind of make it a little resistance, right? And then we can increase that resistance. Then from there, we increase, the next 3 minutes, we positional spar the position that we've been working, right? Whether it's like positional spar bottom half guard with the hand tucked and you're doing the Kimura, but you positional spar the Kimura, meaning we're both going live. We're both kind of the rules are just like a defined beginning and defined end point of the round. And that's what the rules are for this round. At that point, you're ready to add whatever you just worked into your live training. And then from there, you can start to focus on the idea of live drilling. We're talking about live drilling is, drilling, deadpan drilling is somebody who is not resisting and I'm repetitively hitting the move on. Live drilling is when you get the opportunity to roll with somebody who you are better than, or at least better than from a specific place, and you try to hit that move multiple times, or even just multiple times in training, right? And you live drill it. Sometimes I will come into practice and sometimes I'll be motivated, I'll be ready, I'll be like, I'm gonna hit 25 guillotines today. I've been working on my guillotine and I've been playing designated winner, I've been drilling it. I'm gonna hit 25 guillotines. And I go into practice, whether I hit them or not, I'm focused on the guillotine during the live training. I'm doing as many rounds as it takes to get my 25 guillotines. Some days I come in and the mental, I'm totally exhausted. And I'm like, yeah, there's no way I'm gonna hit any guillotines today. Or you know what? I'll set my limit low. 5 guillotines. If I can hit 5 guillotines, that is perfect for me. Okay. And so as you look at those things, as you look at the different types of training methods, what is important is that you think fun first. So whatever of these training methods that you have more fun with, that they are being, obviously you have to be totally engaged to know whether or not you're having fun, but that you are mentally engaged and your partner is mentally engaged. Usually you have a common goal. With designated winner, the goal may be to add the Kimura to both of our games, right? And so we're switching top and bottom. We have this common goal. And while I'm the feeder, our job is the same. I'm the feeder. My job is to help you get better at the Kimura. When you're the feeder, your job is to help me get better at the Kimura, right? Since we're being cooperative and not competitive, we're able to get better so much faster than if we just live roll. And there's nothing wrong with just live rolling. I think that there should be periods of time in your jiu-jitsu where, a month or 2 or 3, where you're going, things feel stale. I'm not able to add anything new. Nothing's fun for me to add. Maybe you should just roll a little bit. Eventually, the beauty of jiu-jitsu, as you do enough rounds, you're going to find other holes in your game. You're going to find other problems, or your training partners will find those for you, right? And then you'll have stuff to work again. And then you can fall back into your effective practice routine. But that being said, don't think that your effective practice routine is going to always be the same weekly routine. Maybe the same times, maybe you're always training at 6 on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and that's part of your routine. But what happens in that training needs to be what is going to be best for you, what is going to help you get closer to your jiu-jitsu goals. So now let's look at the third point, and this is the third step to jiu-jitsu greatness, and that is mental discipline. Mental discipline is truly going to be what separates mediocre grapplers from great grapplers. And I promise that it goes this way. I've been doing jiu-jitsu for 15 years now, and I have trained with a lot of people. I've trained under the same person, but I have gotten to train side by side with a lot of people. And this funny thing happens in jiu-jitsu. You always will come in and some people will have more talents. Some people will be able to develop skills faster. Some people will be able to dedicate more time to training. But there is one thing that separates black belt from white belt, that separates black belt from blue belt. And it is going to be mental discipline in the form of consistency. We talked about understanding, right? That's the first job for us. We're trying to understand. The next job is to focus on what methods help us take that understanding and get good and actually get to where we can perform. And then lastly, we've got to do it for a really, really long time. That is the most important factor out of all the things that we talked about. If you took somebody and you put them in the best school in the world, and you said, hey, you get to train and learn from all these great guys. They have the best training methods. They have all these things. And they just weren't consistent. They were hot and they would do a month of really hard training and then they would have to take off a month of training. And then they would be back for 2 and then off for 2. And then you had somebody who's at a decent gym and they were consistent for 10 years. And both people kept these routines for 10 years. And all other physical attributes, all other things like that are the same. It wouldn't even be close. The person with more consistency would win. And the reason I say this, the reason I believe this, is because I've lived it a lot of times. When I look back on my jiu-jitsu, one thing that I did better than most people that are peers of mine is stay consistent. I think that the longest time that I ever took off jiu-jitsu was 4 weeks for a shoulder injury. And in that 4 weeks, basically the entire time was focused on rehab. I was still coming in and watching class. I was still watching instruction. I was still focused on getting better. But then you add the fact that I've been doing jiu-jitsu for 15 years. And that's why I am at where I'm at. The worst thing that you can do is this hot and cold. And the reason I say that is because these guys that are hot, that are like, yeah, coach, I'm committed. I'll be here forever. I'm going to be one of your black belts one day. Those people tend to then have really cold spells. And during their cold spells, they quit. And the hardest thing in jiu-jitsu is to quit for a period of time and then come back. And the reason I say that that's the hardest thing is because it will destroy your ego. You're a blue belt, and then you take 6 months off, you take a year off. All those white belts used to not even be close to you will probably be dominating you. Probably won't even be close. And you'll get discouraged. And then if you suffer from the hot cold, you're definitely, do you think that's going to make it you hot again? No. That is going to suck the life out of you. And so, one of the most important things that I think you can do in jiu-jitsu is focus on progress and not perfection. Focus on progress and not perfection. It's so easy if you're, I'm saying if you're a competitor, but even if you're not, it is so easy to look at how you performed in the gym one night and say, and like, let that be your identity. And you let it affect you so negatively. Instead of just saying, hey, I progressed a little. Yeah, I lost every single round, but I did a little bit better at winning that underhook. You know, and I noticed it. Or even maybe I still lost the underhook every time, but I saw it happen. And I actually recognized, I increased my understanding enough that I recognized that losing that underhook was the beginning of my demise every single round. Because now that you understand that the underhook is important, what can you do? You can use good training methods. You can add it into your effective practice routine, your weekly, your monthly, your whatever routine, and focus on getting better at winning that underhook. And so now, even with that mindset, even losing is good. Because when you lose, you can start to ask yourself more questions. You can start to deepen your understanding. You know, I call this a callback to, oh my gosh, I wish I should have had the episode number written down. I'll make sure to, I've referenced quite a few episodes, and so I'll make sure to link this one in the description also. But I did a Huron Gracie interview, and it's one of my favorite. It's definitely top 3 for me in favorite interviews on the show. And something really cool that he talked about. And if you've watched, Huron or Henner, or just really a lot of just people have done jujitsu for a long time. Jujitsu just starts to become philosophy to them. And so the finishing question on the show used to be, how do you suck less at jujitsu? And then during an interview, that would always be what I would finish with. Now it's like, what's the best jujitsu advice you've gotten? And I really like that one, but how do you suck less? Still, it just was cool, right? But here on like paused, like really thought about it. How do you suck less? And then first he said, maybe when you get a submission, you're excited because jujitsu works. He said, maybe when you get submitted, you could be excited because jujitsu works. And he says, and maybe instead instead of saying, oh, I suck, darn, maybe that could affect your curiosity. And maybe, he says, you let the guy take your back again. And then you say, well, how did he choke me? And then you really understand how he choked you. Well, he chokes me with this right hand on the lapel. And so maybe you let him get the back again. And so maybe you just focus on keep that right hand off my lapel. And then guess what starts to happen? You've started to understand jujitsu better simply by just understanding this one fight. And you're able to get so much better. And then, of course, for us, we focus on the method in which we take that understanding and apply it to the rest of our jujitsu. We focus on the method in which we train. And then the most important part of that is going to be staying consistent. So now let's talk about how to stay consistent, because that is just such a huge battle. So many people are hearing this episode and saying, well, yeah, I know that I suck because I'm not consistent, but how do I be more consistent? One of the first and simplest ways to be consistent is to be more positive. So often your own negativity is what keeps you off the mats. Your own perspective is keeping you off the match. We talk about that small voice in your head that reminds you of every failure, every other skill, just like grappling, that you've tried to develop, that you've committed to for a few months, and then you quit because you're a quitter and you suck and you should hate yourself, right? Wrong. Reframe it. I can look back. I got my black belt 5 years ago. And yes, I could tell myself, Josh, you've had these plans, you've committed to these things that you said you were going to be able to do competitively, and you haven't done any of them. And I could remind myself of that all the time. I could remind myself and keep myself aware of how much I suck and how much I fail. Or I can reframe it. I can look back. I can say, hey, 5 years ago, when I got my black belt, if I got to grapple that guy, it wouldn't even be close. I would beat him down. That's exciting. That's awesome. That shows that jujitsu growth works, and you can continue to grow and you can continue to compound your growth. And that's huge. That is so important for jujitsu. So when we are looking at positive self-talk, it was just a really little bit of a tangent, a little bit of a random story, but I got to do a Jared Weiner seminar last weekend. And yes, he is committed. He's coming back on the show. We already know what we're going to talk about. I promise it's going to be a phenomenal episode. I can't wait to get him back on. But during the seminar, I've told you guys this before. I always get so much out of being around Jared. He's just a phenomenal leader. And I got a lot out of being around him at the seminar, of course. But somebody had asked a question about competition. And if you've met Jared, you know that he's like fierce when it comes to competition. Generally, the warm up, the setup, he's not your friend. And he kind of touched on those kind of things. And we'll bring him on the show to talk about those things. But he said something really interesting that was surprising for me. He's so hard-nosed. It's so much about being tough. It's so much about going out and grinding and being ready to fight. And they said, what about mental prep for the competition? And he said, absolutely. He said, be positive. He said, no negativity. Be positive. That is the most important thing for mental prep for competition. He says, you're visualizing your jujitsu happening. You're visualizing your hand getting raised. You're visualizing your jujitsu. He goes, you start to get this negative thought of, well, what if this starts to happen? He goes, don't even finish the thought. Get it out. Get it out. Positivity only. Positive thoughts only. And that is, to me, like I said, I've been consistent in jiu-jitsu for a long time, and I've probably been more consistent than 99% of the people out there. But something else that I have been because of the people around me is positive. I have always been able to pick up on, hey, I'm getting better at this. Yeah, I'm still losing. But if you can separate that, if you can say my performance on the day-to-day basis at the gym, it is not that important. The important thing is that I am progressing. It's not about performing. And if you're a competitor, maybe it is more about performing. And so maybe once a week, you put into your schedule, today is my performance day, or once every other week or whatever, right? Once a month, today is performance. And then, of course, you can take some off days before. You can make sure your diet is tuned in that day. You can make sure your mental prep, your music, your whatever, right? Because you can practice performance. But then all the other days, you can just focus on progression. And you can say, hey, for that performance day 2 weeks from now, I need to be hitting straight ankle locks. I couldn't finish a single one last time when I was focused on performance. And so you drill your straight ankle. You have your jiu-jitsu conversations. You watch your instructionals. You put it into your routine that, hey, we're going to do designated winner straight ankle locks from top and bottom for at least 30 minutes over the next 2 weeks, at least an hour over the next 2 weeks. You live train those positions. You positional spar those positions. And guess what? You have created your effective practice routine to get you to where you want to go, to be able to perform. But it was because during most of your training, you were focused on progress and not performance. And this will help you stay so much more positive, right? And some days you're going to come in and perform absolutely terribly. And so what you do is you reframe. I went into training a few weeks ago, and I felt like I was standing in quicksand. And I was supposed to be wrestling too. That's one of the worst things in the world when you are a jiu-jitsu guy that's trying to wrestle and you don't have movement. Your legs aren't moving very well and you're having to just stand square with people. And so what I did was I reframed. I felt it pretty early on. I know my body. I know how I can feel and to be able to make these adjustments in my training, mid-training. But I said I could just give up here. Or what we've talked about quite a few times on the show in the past few weeks, there was this Tim Ferriss interview of James Clear, and James Clear, he wrote Atomic Habits, and he talked about this idea called the 2-minute rule, but he also just used this phrasing that have found really helpful, and it was keep the schedule, reduce the scope, meaning you feel terrible and you're supposed to be performing today. Maybe you just say, okay, well, my performance today is going to be not getting submitted. Usually it's dominate these guys. Usually it's win every single round. But today I'm just holding on and I need to reduce the scope because I do not have the physicality in my body. I don't have the recovery to be aggressive today, to fight hard today. But you keep the routine, because if you don't, keeping that schedule the next time is going to be so much harder. But if you just keep the routine, and this is what the 2-minute rule was, if you just spend 2 minutes of time focused on that routine, even though you usually do an hour and a half, that 2 minutes, that one rep that you get, those few rounds, for another example, so I said like the wrestling practice was like that. So my mind started going defensive. okay, I feel terrible. Yes, I'm still looking for my takedowns, but the most important thing for me today is not getting taken down. That is going to be my primary goal because I'm too beat up to focus on taking everybody down today. I can just tell. And when I started trying, I was so tired, I was almost getting taken down, or I was getting taken down. Well, I need to reframe. I need to reduce the scope, but keep the schedule. Just this week, I was going into one of our big open mats, and it's like the toughest training. And again, I was beat up. Man, I am beat up right now. There's a lot of beat up stories, but I was beat up. I didn't have it. I had actually been the uki at the Jared seminar, and he threw me 300, 400 times. It wasn't a judo seminar, but he warmed up in both. It was two different seminars. He warmed up both seminars with trips, and man, my hand was tingling from slapping the mat, doing so many break falls. Yeah, I got more reps doing break falls than I have ever. But during this other training session, I went in, and normally my mindset would have been different. Normally it would have been my performance day, and I would have been focused on like, hey, I'm here to win. I'm here to just dominate rounds. And instead, I wanted to win some rounds. I wanted to focus on getting finishes. I have some submission only stuff coming up. And so I said, okay, I'm going to train as many rounds as I need to get 10 submissions. Once I'm done with those 10 submissions, I'm just going to be a coach. I'm just going to sit on the side, and if anybody needs help, I'll help them. But I just, I don't have it in me today. I know, though, that this is going to be better than me just leaving and saying, hey, I'm going to go watch football, right? I'm not training today. I'm going to go just home. I kept the schedule. And so next week, when I do have energy, hopefully, it's going to be way easier for me to keep the schedule versus me having created this new schedule where my habit is watching football. And so to kind of bring everything together at the end, holy cow, these episodes have been way too long lately. I got a lot of compliments on the hour and a half that I did last week, but shoot, what happened to getting it done in 45 minutes, Josh? Just have too much crap I'm talking about, I guess. I don't know. I need to break it down. If you guys like the hour episode, maybe, listens wise, it did really, really well. And so maybe people do like a little bit longer. Who knows? But usually I don't have that much knowledge in me. But when we're looking at creating that effective practice routine, our practice routine is going to be built around habits that we've developed, good habits or bad habits. So if you have this bad habit of coming in and not paying attention during class, you need to fix that habit. To get an effective practice routine, it is not just showing up. Yes, showing up is essential, but it is not just showing up. It's being engaged. Pay attention while the moves are being taught. Pay attention while you're drilling the moves. Have good conversation about what you're drilling. Have good back and forth. Find the right partner. Find a partner that helps motivate you. Make that a habit. Help them develop the habit with you. Right? And so I think kind of my challenge to you guys to finish this episode, because we've talked about a lot of different things. I guess before we challenge, let me just kind of like re-explain everything from top to bottom. So if we are trying to achieve jiu-jitsu greatness, we need three things. The first is understanding. Acknowledge when you are adding understanding. Be appreciative. Be excited about that understanding that you get. Then we have to take that understanding and turn it into skills. We have to get good, right? Skills are things we can develop. And so when someone teaches me grip fighting and teaches me some important grips, I should take my training method and start to add those grips to my training method so I can add that into my actual jiu-jitsu and actually get good. And then the most important thing that we talked about is you need to commit to doing it for the next 10 to 20 years. Yeah, there are people that say, oh, you could get your black belt in 5 years. Yeah, you can, but you're going to have to just double the amount that you train, right? The people that get it in 10 years, usually they're the 3 to 4 times a week people. The people that get it in 5 are usually the 7 days a week people, right? Or the multiple times a day people. So regardless of how far you want to get in jiu-jitsu, make sure that you commit mentally. You write that contract to yourself that I know being good at jiu-jitsu is going to change me. It's going to affect my life greatly. And it's something that I desire. It's something that I want. And so I am committed for the next 10 years that I will be doing this. If you have the financial capacity, pay at your gym for a period of time. Really commit. And then you stay consistent. With that commitment, you start to be consistent on your understanding, be consistent on your methods in which you are training. Make your adjustments. Think fun first. Make sure you're having fun in your training, because if you're not, it is going to be way harder to develop those habits. But if you love the way that you're training and you love the partner you're training with and you love the gym you're at, those habits become easier. They're still not done for you. You still have to do them yourself, but they do become easier. And so my challenge to you guys is one of these three, I am sure, stuck out more than the others. Maybe you do have maybe you do have a good routine, and maybe you have a lot of mental discipline and you can be consistent, but understanding is the hardest part for you. Focus on that for the next 6 weeks to 6 months. Maybe you understand and you watch so many instructionals, and maybe you're consistently showing up, but the methods in which you train, you aren't as engaged in, or you just aren't trying different methods and you've kind of gotten stale in this routine that you have. Make some tweaks. Make some adjustments, learn from some different people, ask questions to people who are better than you about how they like to take their understanding and apply it into training. And then last, if you are someone who struggles with consistency, find a way to be more consistent and don't focus on perfection. With that perfection, you are going to ruin your consistency. If that idea of, well, if it can't be a great training session, I'm not going. That is going to hurt your consistency. Make sure that you focus on being there. This idea that like if you get injured, you keep the same schedule. Even though you're not learning as much, even though you're not progressing as much, you are still practicing the habit, and the habit is going to be essential for your future of jiu-jitsu. This is why it's so hard when you get injured for 6 weeks to come back to the gym and just go back to your normal schedule. You've broken the habit. And so if you're struggling with that mental discipline, focus on habits. And just a little side note recommendation, I really would recommend the book Atomic Habits. I think that it is very helpful for athletes trying to develop certain things like this. But that's all I have for you guys. I hope you guys enjoy this one. And we'll go ahead and kick it over to Josh to close us out. And that is the episode. If you guys are just visiting us for the first time on the show, or maybe you've listened to a few random episodes and you just want to create a habit of listening to the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show, be sure to kind of call back to the commercial. Be sure to sign up for the 3 Lenses ebook. What that'll do is it'll put you on our email list, and our email list is just going to keep you up to date on all of the exciting things that we have going on at the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show, and more importantly at simplifyingjujitsu.com. We have some new things that we're going to be doing at simplifyingjujitsu.com that I am so excited for. I've been kind of teasing them and explaining to you guys that it's going to be different. It's going to be something that no one in the jiu-jitsu space is doing right now. Hopefully, after a little bit of time, people will see the success that comes from it and see the the fun and the good things that happen out of the new things that we're going to be doing at Simplifying Jiu-Jitsu, and they copy them and maybe do them better or whatever. But hopefully we can maybe subtly change the game a little bit, change how things are done in the jiu-jitsu space. And that's going to be our focus for this year. And so if you are not, if you've listened to the show, thank you guys for supporting. Thank you guys for making it a habit and continuing to listen to the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. I really appreciate you guys, and I wouldn't be able to kind of believe in the future that we're trying to build if it wasn't for the consistency of the listeners. And so, as always, thank you to you guys. If you guys have any questions, any suggestions for a new episode, a suggestion for an interview, because we're going to be getting back to doing quite a few interviews soon, send me an email, josh@simplifyingjujitsu.com. I usually recommend send me an Instagram message, but I'm going to stop doing that to try to just funnel all of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show related ideas to the email, josh@simplifyingjujitsu.com, mainly because I hate social media and I just don't want to be on Instagram anymore. And so this is kind of my way of maybe helping myself stay off of it a little bit more. So again, if you have any questions, inquiries, anything like that, you want to sponsor the show, you just want to talk for a second, send me an email, josh@simplifyingjujitsu.com. And that is all that I have for you guys. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And I hope that today's episode helps you guys suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu. Have a great day, guys.